when we're looking at 3D things, we really have to understand it's totally different than if you look at something you would draw in Photoshop or Illustrator or even on paper, because we're actually building the stuff in like that would actually be built. So if I'm building a cube, I need to build the cube, and depending on what sides I'm going to look at or what faces I'm going to look at, really depends on how I'm going to build that thing. So when we build our room, like this one, this is an example of a room. This wall that we're seeing right here, that we're not seeing, that fourth wall, that's not there, like in 3D. They just don't have anything there. Typically they wouldn't. Even the sky that's outside, typically that's an environment image that typically they would project into the room to help light it up and make it look more realistic. Okay. This stuff here, these could be typically like a flat plane or like a cube or something, and just have a picture stuck on top of it. Even this bar over here, that could be just a cube with a picture of wood on top of it. Okay. The more complex stuff like this chair leg and this lamp and this little structure back here and that little whatever that is, you know, there's a lot more modeling that goes into those. But a lot of our stuff we try to build off of just basic shapes, so that it's obviously easier, faster to render, so on. Okay. There's a plain room. And what's cool about cinema and 3D in general is that a lot of it really depends on the style that you're after. Some people I know who use Photoshop, they could draw really good cartoony in Photoshop, or they could draw really realistic in Photoshop, but trying to blend different styles is sometimes tricky for them. In 3D, it really is just kind of like adding different lights or different textures or whatever, you can really get these cool styles. So something like this, if I was inside that room, it would look a lot more realistic than it does when it's pulled out. And all that is just kind of like a different camera angle. The roof obviously is missing. You can really create some cool stuff. Same thing here. And then that doesn't count, that's Lazy Boy. You can really get in depth into this too. So in our second animation or second modeling class, we really do get into modeling highly detailed things. In this class, we used to do the intro to 3D. We used to do one big project, which was basically a room. Like we'd start off with the room, and then throughout the entire semester, we would just add stuff to the room, and then your end project, you'd have this animation of all these things in the room. It was okay, but typically like the first things you modeled were really nice or really bad, and then gradually you got better. So then your last thing was like really high detail, and then you have like junk at the beginning. So stuff like this, like amazing. Like you can create some really high detailed things inside here. And depending on the level of detail you want to go, you can really, you know, push the envelope for that. Here's more stuff. Some of these things, just so you can kind of get a idea of how it works, typically the first stage in everything is modeling. So we're going to go through and we're going to model out some basic shapes. We're going to create today, we should be able to create the room, we should be able to create a desk, and we should be able to create a chair, at least those three things today. You'll be free to go and explore how to do different things. In order to make it look this realistic, a lot more work goes into it, okay? But when we model stuff, we keep it as simple as possible, model it, and then after we're done modeling it, then we texture it, okay? And texturing it is where we take it from that gray stage like this, and really can give it a bit more life to it, make it look a little bit more realistic. Anything here that has a different material as far as it looks different than the other items, typically that's a different texture. So this picture is one texture, that's a texture, that's a texture. Each one of these are all different textures. This pattern on the cushions is probably a texture. The flooring here, the carpet here, each one of those books is a separate texture. This wood over here is probably a different texture. And the pictures on here are also different textures. So your textures, because you could spend like weeks just texturing stuff and building these textures. And it's not just about color information. A lot of the textures, if you want them to look realistic, 3D. There's a lot more stuff that goes into it. So this is just a regular sphere, and this has a kind of, what's it called? Like a metal grid texture on top of it. That's just the coloring for it, but the way the light interacts it, that's another texture. And then the way that it bumps up, that's another texture. So at the very minimum, usually you have at least 3 different images for each texture in order to make it look more realistic. Same thing here. These are just spheres, and they have textures on them to make them look like that. Same thing there, same thing there. Okay, so we're not going to hit this anytime soon, but we will go over some of this by the end of class. You'll have a much better idea of how to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I believe last time, P drive 2510, last time we made a Miniroom folder and we made our template folder. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start off in the Miniroom folder, and we're just going to open up Cinema and just start building our Miniroom. Or if you can follow along, then obviously. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to first start off with just like, what does the room dimensions, like what does the shape of this room? We need to know that so that we can start populating stuff into it. Because of what we're going to be doing with this, we don't want this to be a cathedral. Okay, it's not like a huge room. It's kind of like a bedroom or something like that, right? So what shape typically do you think a room is, like basic shape? If we're working in 3D though? Cube. Right? So we're going to click on the cube up here at the top, and then we're just going to get dimensions, okay? Typically rooms are wider and longer than they are taller, right? Typically a house, a regular house, the ceilings are about 8 feet, but the room's dimensions may be like 12 by 10 or something like that. So I'm just going to pull these out kind of arbitrarily just to give my room some shape. Okay. So all I've done is just pull the dots out on either side to make the room have just a little bit more shape to it. Now if I were to create another object, how big do you think the object would be? Should be smaller than the room, but what size do you think it's going to be? Right. So if we're going to build a chair or a desk or whatever, it makes it easier for us if the room is already kind of sized up to about the size of it, the scale of it. So if I hit T to get to my scale tool, and then I just click and drag, I can make this pretty big. And this is just kind of roughing in a number. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just making it, you know, bigger than it was. So ideally when I make my next cube, that cube would just sit inside this area and not be the same size as it, and I have to shrink everything down as I build it, okay? Everything we do is modular, so we can make things bigger or smaller on the fly. Right before we're at the last stages of rendering our stuff out, we could make it bigger or smaller. That's not a big deal either. All right, so that's perfect, right? Sure. I'm going to move it up to the ground floor. So I don't like to have, this is the grid. It's just basically just like After Effects or Photoshop or any of them. There's just a grid to help you line things up. I don't like my objects to be like sitting below the grid because I don't, okay? Other reasons that we'll get into. So I'm going to go to my Move tool, which is E, and then just move it up so it's about sitting on top of the grid. Okay? It doesn't have to be perfect, but just better than it was. All right, remember, you can tumble around the scene, hold Alt, drag around with the left mouse, hold Alt, middle mouse, or right mouse does that, and then middle mouse does this. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to remove one of these faces. All my stuff is going to go inside the room, which right now we can't see inside the room. I could like zoom inside it like this, and I'm actually like inside the room, but it becomes like horrible to have to do this where I keep zooming in and out like through the wall. So I basically want to have just an area that's just like that wall doesn't exist. It's just open. So I'm going to hit the C key. Does anyone remember what the C key does? No? It like basically takes our object and gets it out of like a mode that allows us to edit the subdivisions and then the width and height. So those dots that we had to kind of shape the dimensions of this, those are now gone. And now we can actually edit the shape. It's basically just like bakes the shape down. So now I can go into face mode and I can select this face and delete it. On the left here, you'll see there's two dots, there's lines, and then there's one that has like this orange face right here on the left side. Those are the different modes of components. So think of like the pen tool, you can select the whole path, or you can grab the individual points on the path. Because this is 3D, we can grab the points, we can grab the lines, which are these edges here, or we can grab a whole face. We want to grab this face and delete it. So we click on the face one, we click on that face, and then we just hit backspace or delete. Okay, and so now it's open. Before selecting it, I just clicked on that button there. There is, let me jump over to Maya real quick so you can kind of see this. It's easier to kind of show inside here. So in Maya, there's a cube just like we would have inside Cinema. We also have an area where we can change things like the divisions. Okay, so that was one of the things that we're allowed to do in Cinema, or able to do in Cinema, right when we create an object. We can control the divisions. We can also control things like the height and the width. Okay, now in Cinema, let's say we're happy, like that's the shape I want. I would hit C and then it locks it in. Maya works a little bit different, so there is no C key for that. And this is why Cinema forces you to do it. So let's say I grab faces just like we did before. And in this case, I'm just going to grab these faces here. Okay, and I'll delete them. So now I've deleted those faces just like we would in Cinema. But then I come over back here to this, and I start adding divisions. See how it kind of freaks out? Because it remembers you deleted faces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I change the amount of divisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are in different spots now. Okay? So Cinema, before you do any deleting, it forces you have to hit that C key to bake it in. That way you don't end up with something like that. Okay? So we hit C. That's baked. We have our window or our door opening here. Perfect. So now what we want to do is, I am satisfied with the way the room looks to a point. So let's go and drop it onto a layer, and then we'll save it. Okay? Before I do that, just so you can see, in face mode, I can grab any face. Let's say my wall's too narrow. I can grab any face and move it. So I'm just with the regular move tool. I can take my ceiling and make it taller or shorter or whatever. So we always come back and edit it. We're not stuck to this shape. I just wanted you to see that before you go to the next step. All right, so on the bottom right is where layers are. So we're going to go to layers. And we're going to go to File, and then say New Layer. On the far right, it's hard to see, but there's a tab that says Layers. Yeah. Cinema likes to have all these like side tabs. It's very difficult to see sometimes. We're just going to make a new layer under File, New Layer, right in that same window. And we'll give this a name. We'll just call it Room. Okay? You can call it Room, call it Shell. As long as you know what it's called, it's easy to get to. Okay? Now what I want to do is I want to take this layer and I want to make sure that my room is part of that layer. So I drag this layer onto this little icon. Okay, there's a little square up here in the object area. I just drag that and drop it onto it. And that way this layer and that object are connected. So if I were to hide the layer, it should hide the object. What's that? All right. Now, there's a bunch of icons there. I'm going to go through a couple of them that typically we would want to deal with. Number one, we have the S with a little dot in it. Any guesses as to what S might mean? No. No. Solo. Okay, so if we have 50 objects and we want to see the one, click that. It solos just that one object. Okay. Yep. V with an eyeball. Yep, visible. Yep. Okay. This R with a little clapper on it. Okay, that one's a bit trickier. It's rendering, right? So if I turn that off, and then I go to render this, it doesn't show up. But if the rendering is on and I render it, it does. Now, why would we have that? What's the reason for it? Well, I can turn visibility off. It still renders the item. Even though it's not showing up, it still renders the item because that one's still checked. Okay. Yep. Or if I have something that's really complex, might be weighing my scene down, I can hide it in my viewport but still have it render. Okay. Don't worry about the next one. And then what about that one? The little L with a lock. Yep. Okay, so we're going to lock it. We're done with it. We'll just lock that item. Okay. The other one I'll show just so you can see it, but if this is turned on or off, you'll see that the item doesn't show up here. So that may freak you out, like, where's my item at, because it was there a second ago. Okay, so if you accidentally hit this, your item disappears from this area, even though it's here. And if it's locked and not in that area, you can't really get to it very easy without going to the layers and doing that. Okay, so all we're doing is we assigned it to that layer and we locked it. Okay. That way we don't accidentally move it. In Cinema, it's easy to grab something on accident and move it, and it's flat on the ground, but now it's like floating above, and so that sucks. So now it's locked, so we're not going to move it. All right, so we're going to build a bookcase first. Bookcase always goes in first. You guys, you still use bookcases? Just have one Kindle on it and that's it? All right, so we're going to build a bookcase. So the first thing we do with anything we model is look at a picture of a bookcase. Okay, that way we know what they're supposed to look like. Obviously, there's a million different shapes and sizes and designs for bookcases, depending on how complex you want to go. We're going to keep it super simple and just do a Walmart or one of these type things. Okay, like that's how simple we're going to go with this. That doesn't zoom in. This does. There we go. Okay, so that's what we're going to build. So as we build this, we want to always kind of keep in mind where divisions are going to be. Okay, so before we get into the divisions, what shape should I start off with? Cube, right? All right, so let's build a cube. Okay, so we click the cube button. You'll notice that the dots on yours, they may be gone, right? I don't know if you see that on yours, but I don't have those dots on mine to let me kind of reproportion what this looks like. Do yours have the dots? No. No. Okay. Any guesses? C. Nope, not C. Then you just hit undo. If you hit C, it locks it, so we can't do that. We are still in face mode. Okay, so remember on the house or the room, we clicked on face mode. So we're going to click back on object mode or model mode, which is up there. And now we get those points back, and now we can kind of proportion this for what we want the bookcase to look like.
How do you get to object mode again?
Right up here. Just click the top one. Yep, model. Yep. And then you should be able to adjust where these points are at. Okay, so all we're looking at now is just trying to get a proportion for how big this bookcase is going to be. Is it a 5 shelf? Is it a 3 shelf? It doesn't matter to me. Just kind of like that shape. Okay, thinner than it is, wider, or obviously taller being the biggest one. good. All right. Now let's look at the divisions. Okay. I need my eraser. I want to write that again. All right, so we have our cube here, and if we look at the picture of the bookcase, what we're looking for are edges, okay? So if we start on this side, that's obviously an edge on that side of the bookcase. Where's the next edge?
Inside wall.
Don't worry about the inside wall, but yeah, this little line right here, right? It's hard to see, but yeah. So there's a line right there, right? And that's the thickness of the board, right? Whatever this side wall is made of, that's what that is, okay? Imagine looking at it dead on without perspective. So if that was the case, we wouldn't see that one, right? Because it would be just like head on. All right, so we have this one, we have that one, then where's the next one? Opposite side? Yep, okay. So same thing, way over here. And then there, one at a time. We gotta go this way first, then we'll get to the top one. Okay, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have these 4 here. Okay, now let's go the other way. So we'll start here at the bottom. That's that one. The next one is that one, right? That one's kind of like right there. And then we go up a little bit. There's one at the bottom of the shelf. Right, there's 2 for each shelf. Imagine those lines are straight. And then, like you said, there's one right at the top. Okay, so imagine they're straight and that they're even. Okay. There's a ruler here. I should have used that. Whatever. All right, so that's what we want to keep in mind. When we go back into Cinema, we want lines, not in the right spots yet, because it won't automatically populate them, but we want to make sure we have enough lines to count, to include all of that stuff, okay? So when we come back here, I'm going to switch back to my attributes, and then I'm going to change my segments. Don't worry too much about which area you're playing with. Just know that this is one direction, this is another direction. So by adjusting these segments here, you'll figure out which one's supposed to be which one, okay? Y is going to be up and down, but X and Z, it really depends on how you scaled it. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. The lines aren't? That's right. Under, remember display, under GORAD shading lines. I forgot, somehow mine is on and yours is not. Display, yep, GORAD shading lines. Yep. I don't know how to do it. I've clicked something, I'm sure, somewhere along the lines. But I forget where. All right, so we need 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 8 lines, including the very bottom one and including the very top one. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Yep. And it'll depend too, like this bookcase, that bottom area is like flat. Some of the bookcases, they actually have like an inset there. So that might be like how you design it and set it up. We're doing the lines at the beginning here. At any point, we can add more. So let's say we forgot an edge. We can always add that in afterwards. So don't be concerned with, oh, I forgot to add one. Or if you added too many, we can always delete it. Okay? So I added 7 segments in the Y direction. Now this one may change depending on what your file looks like. So looking at mine, see how I have the blue arrow facing to the right? So imagine that it goes left and right. that's the Z direction. Okay? If I spin around this way, I have the X, which is the red, going that way. So if I come over to my segments in X and I start adding divisions, it'll add them this way. I don't want any segments on the side. The side of my bookcase, like this is the side of my bookcase, is just completely flat. There's nothing as far as divisions or shelves or anything happening there. All of my divisions for mine are right here. If you change the proportions of yours, and you did it that way, now X is the front of mine, and Z is the side of it. Okay? As long as you kind of have an idea of like what's the front, what's the top, sides, whatever, then you can just go and start adding those divisions. Okay? So I should be able to add 3 divisions going that way. So 3 segments in Z gives me 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. Cool? All right. So now what we need to do is we need to put the lines in the right spot. So Cinema will not let me edit any of those lines while we have this available. Okay, while we still have those segments there and that sizing there, it will not let me add any lines or tweak any lines while this is there. So how do I get this to go away? Nope. How do I get this option of there gone? You said it when you first made your cube. C. In Italian, that works out perfectly, right? You say it's C, and I say C. All right, so now we have this in edit mode, meaning that we can actually edit the lines. If we decided we wanted to scale things up, we still can scale things up. I can still go to my scale manipulator and still scale it in any direction. I can still grab faces and move them or push them or move whatever. Okay, so what we need to do now is I want to take the edges and move them apart. Okay, right now we have 2 lines coming straight down the middle, and I need them to be off to the side. They should probably be evenly spaced, right? That makes things easier. So where do I go to edit edges? Nope. Yep, right here on the left side. So not faces, you'll go to edges. Okay, now do you want to do it the quick way or the slow way? Quick way, good. Good answer. Double click. You double click an edge and that will loop selection. So it selects all the edges all the way around. Okay. We talked last time about when we model stuff, maybe a little bit. One of the things we always want to do is keep what are called quads. Every one of these faces has 4 edges attached to it. That's what makes this work. If there's any triangles or faces with more than 4 sides, this doesn't work. Okay. So if you double click, it doesn't go all the way around, something is wrong with one of your faces. Cool. So that's one. So let's shift double click the next one. So now we should have 2 loops selected. You will find also that selecting stuff is a pain in the butt sometimes because of where your manipulator is. Right now with my manipulator right where it is, if I try to grab this line, it may interfere with that green bar, right? So you have to sometimes rotate around and try to find just a good angle to hit your stuff at, okay? So now we have both of those selected. I'm in the scale tool, and what do you think I'm going to do here? I'm going to scale them, okay? Scaling them in this case is actually moving them apart. If I went to move and I tried to move it, look, it moves it this way or it moves it that way. If I'm in scale, I grab just the one manipulator and it'll spread them apart. Shift does lock it, yes. So it'll actually like snap it out, right, in increments. For some reason, Maya's is J. I don't know why they would use J as a hotkey for that. okay? Just to show you the alternative of doing that, if you were in the move tool and you tried to move this one over to this side, and then you grab this one, you try to move this one over to that side, it's very difficult to get both of those even.
Exactly the same.
Right, so that's why using that scale works out perfectly, because all we do is just scale it apart. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we do have to use the move tool for the next few of them. So we hit E to get to the move tool. And then all you're going to do is this part we do have to eyeball. So there's no easy way to get these. Well, there is a different way to do it. Right now we're just going to kind of move them into position. Okay. So I'm just kind of moving these like that. And it's a bookcase, so realistically those little pegs can move anywhere, so you can move that bookcase shelf anywhere you want to move it. Okay, just eyeball the thickness of those shelves, try to get them about even. So our next stage here is to actually take the spots that the books go right here, here, and there, and actually make it so that our books can go there. Okay, so I went to face mode. Cinema calls it polygon mode, but that doesn't make sense to me, so I'm just going to call it face mode. So go to face mode, and you're just going to shift click on all three of those areas where the books would go. Okay. Now, people are tempted to hit delete. We can't hit delete because what happens is our shelves are like hollow. Nothing there, right? So we can't do that. We have to use one of our three favorite tools. Anyone have a favorite tool already? No? Okay. Our favorite tool is extrude. Okay. Most of the stuff you'll do inside Cinema boils down to three tools. Knife tool, bevels, and extrudes. Okay, those are the three tools. Regardless of if I'm modeling a person or a car or whatever, I'll use those three tools all day long. All right. So on this, I'm going to go to the extrude tool. You can right click on one of those faces and get a list of all the tools there. See if you can find extrude. Tell me when you find it. Okay. Does everyone see it? It's kind of like in the middle here. Extrude. On the far right of it, you see three letters. One says M tilde D, T, and then there's a comma, and then it says D, right? So Cinema sucks for hotkeys. I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess, if you're used to it. But every one of these tools has a hotkey. It actually has two hotkeys. M means modeling, and then the other letter after it means that's the hotkey for it. Yes, sir. Oh, go to face. Yep, and then grab those faces. Let me see. So now right click. Let me pause this real quick. That way if you have to reference it. All right, so we see basically two different hotkeys here. You could hit MT or you could just hit D, okay? I don't know why they would still have two, maybe just for the old time folks who still like to use it, but you don't have to hold anything there. You can hit MT, that goes to extrude, or you can just hit D, that also goes to extrude, or you can right click and go to extrude. However you want to get to extrude, get to extrude. Okay? So now that we're in extrude, we have these three faces selected. The way it works is we click and drag right on the face and it will extrude that face. So you're either going to drag to the right or you're going to drag to the left. One way pushes them in, one way pulls them out. Yes, sir. So the thickness backwards doesn't matter so much as long as it looks like it could work. Okay, because no one's going to be looking at the side of it, then looking at the front, and then trying to figure out, if they match perfectly. The biggest issue people typically have is if they were to go to populate this with a bunch of books. Right now, my bookshelves are pretty huge. Like, these books would be like, I don't know if you know those road atlases that they used to sell like at $5, Barnes & Noble. They were like this big. That's how big that area is, like, for height-wise. And then for the depth of it, they're like this narrow. So this is probably not a good bookcase to be using for that. Maybe this is like a display case. Yeah, that's what it would be. Okay. So that's it. That's our bookcase. Done.
So you can put all your Funko Pop guys on.
Right. Just one. All right. And that'll happen over and over again. So if I were just to grab this face and do that, it's just stretching out the face. If I click right on the face and do it, then it'll actually extrude.
Oh, so we can make mini bookcases on the side.
You could, yeah. All right, so now let's put the bookcase where we want to put it in the room. So we're going to click on the model mode. And then just move the bookcase to a wall. Yeah, you can always go hit T, scale it up, and then find a spot for it. Okay, so the point of this assignment, just so you kind of get the right frame of mind, it's a playing thing. It's for us to get used to the moving tools, the rotating, the scaling, the workflow, kind of like we did last class, but just a little bit more in depth, okay? Also some modeling exercise. All right, so we have our bookcase. We're done with the bookcase. So let's do two things. One, we should probably name it up there, because if you look, we have cube and cube 1. If we had 50 items, it's very difficult to find out what we have, right? So we can just double click up here at the top, and then just call this bookcase. You want to save your file? Yeah, we should save too. So just call it your last name underscore miniroom underscore 01. Yep. So this is the start of that. So we're going to go through a couple props together, and then you'll have a day to kind of experiment and play with that. Okay, like making your own stuff that you add to it. Yes, it should go inside your scenes folder. Sorry, mine all defaulted right to my scenes folder, so I just assumed yours did too. Yeah, so always want to keep it inside your scenes folder on the P drive. And then obviously before you leave today, make sure you grab that whole folder. That way in case you lose something, you still have it. Okay, so we've saved our file. We've named it in the objects area. We should also go into the layers and make a layer for it. And I'm going to make a furniture layer. Furniture. And that way, as I make the desk, as I make the chair, I don't have separate layers for each one. I have a furniture layer, and everything would go in there, okay? If I had stuff on the wall, I could say decorations and have a decorations layer. Okay, so we switched to layers.
So when we make, let's say like couches and stuff like that,
Yep.
we'll just drag that layer into it.
Yep, you just drag this layer up here. Or as you make new layers, you can actually take this icon and drag that icon to another layer automatically. It'll let you do it. Cool. All right. So I'm not going to lock that layer yet, or I guess I could lock it. I'm not going to do anything with it at the moment. Sure, we'll lock it. All right. As I add new stuff, obviously I can just drop those other things in there. Now, let me show you where just that technique alone can take us for modeling other stuff, okay? So someone say they want to model a picture frame, right? Get your reference, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do this one together. I'm just going to show you picture frame. And again, Walmart is a perfect modeling resource for beginner class. All right, it's pretty blocky, right? We do the same kind of thing. Where are my divisions? That's what I'm kind of keeping in mind. I'm going to pull this in like that. That's the thickness of my picture frame. Maybe this is an 8 by 10, roughly like that. Good enough. Okay. Click on my object. There we go. There's my divisions. I hit C. I push those out like this. Make that like that. And then extrude in. Picture frame, right? And then if I want a TV, right? Or a horizontal picture frame or whatever, right? So you got to think about different ways that you can use a lot of the stuff because a lot of the tools are used literally across the board. Picture frames, TVs, monitors, all the stuff is just, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of where am I putting my divisions? Where am I extruding? Okay? I'll throw that on the wall for now.
So let's say like you take that picture or like that object.
Uh-huh.
Those four squares in the corners, could you extrude those out and make it a table?
You could. Spoiler alert, that's how we're making our desk. All right. So stuff like this, all over the place, you can find that. As a beginner, try to think of things kind of compartmentally. Don't try to build everything off of one thing. If I'm trying to build a monitor, if it's for a game, you want them to be like one piece. But if it's for our first projects or, you know, this intro class, the screen can be one item, the arm in the back can be another item, even the foot base could be another item. I could use torus. A million divisions is like way too many divisions, right? So let's pull that down. There's too little divisions. Let's go 6 and 8. Mm-hmm.
If it was for a game, why would you want to?
Less polygons, less pieces of geometry, more easier to work with in the game engine. Game engines are all about speed, so you want to have the simplest piece of geometry as you can. In some cases they can't, some cases you know you have to, but you really want to get it as simple as can. All right. So real quick, there's my monitor stand, right? And delete these, delete those, delete that, delete that. There we go. Even this, like when you're working on a game type thing, I don't see the stuff under here unless it's going to be knocked off the table. I can just leave it like that. And if this is something that's not going to be seen and like someone's not going to be able to walk around here, I don't even need to have it physically attached to the screen as long as it looks like it's part of that screen. So if I took this item, that's a huge base for that screen, right? So something like that is believable enough for someone to say, hey, that's a screen, right? Cool. Throw that off to the side.
So we're just focused on getting it done. We're not focused on optimizing.
Not yet. Right. Eventually, when we get to it, we'll be really optimizing our stuff. The idea at this point is to start off with the least amount of divisions and then gradually add on to it to make more and more. Okay. Cool. So let's start our desk. I use the same desk that I do every time just for fun. I wonder if Walmart has it. No, I don't see the exact one. Okay, it's kind of like this one, but imagine that this little piece is in here, and this cabinet goes across the top. Okay, just picture that. All right, so we're going to start off with a cube. So make sure you're in modeling object mode. Make sure you create a cube. And then our first step in this is to get what is the dimension of that tabletop, like the actual top of the desk. How big is that? Width, length, so on. Okay. I'm also going to kind of bring it up to, an appropriate height of where the desk would be in the room. Like looking at where the bookshelf is, that looks pretty good. Try not to move anything away from the center. It's very easy to just move something like way over here and work on it way over there. But as you model stuff, keeping it centered in the viewport or in the scene really does help. So I didn't move it in the red or the blue at all. I just moved it up in the green, in the Y. What the dimensions of that top part are. So this desk could have a drawer. That's going to make that top part thicker. It could have a keyboard tray. It would be thinner then, and the keyboard tray would sit underneath. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of like, as long as it doesn't look like a huge block of wood in the middle of our room, it'll be fine. Okay. So there's that. Now we need to worry about the divisions here. So let's conceptualize what the divisions would look like. So I know that I'm going to need divisions for each one of the legs, right? So like you were saying, on the bottom of this will extrude those corners out. So I know that I'll need 3 divisions here, 3 divisions there. And I think I should be able to get the rest of that surface based off of this. Okay? So make sure yours has the 3 by 3. And then once you're done with that, you're going to hit C so that we can edit the points. And then just grab those edges like we did on the bookcase and just scale them out. And then the size of your blocks here are the size of the legs. Okay? So you're just scaling those to get this pattern until you get the size of those squares so you can get the size of the legs. All right, some things to be aware of. Because we're working with actual pieces of like geometry, 3D stuff, we do have to be concerned about, you've seen Ghostbusters 1, the original? Yes. Anyone? Okay. What do they say not to do with the streams? Right, same thing here. We don't cross the streams. So this edge should never cross that edge, okay? So if I take this and move it, it looks like everything is fine, but it's not fine. Because this edge is now going to do that, okay? So we have to make sure that we do not cross any of those. If we do, bad things can happen like that. Like we're trying to model and then funky stuff comes up. Just something to be aware of. Usually it's easiest to hit undo until you get back to that point where it is happy. Sometimes you'll get it to where you actually it's faster just to delete the item and then to remake it. If I deleted mine, I can just do that, do this, move it up, drop in my segments. Okay, so if I had an issue, that took me like what, 10 seconds, 15 seconds to do. Um, so definitely easier than trying to rework it. I need to just move this up a little bit more. There we go. Okay. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to take the leg pieces and extrude them outward. Okay, so we're going to switch to face mode or polygon mode, whatever they want to call it. And we're just going to shift click each one of these corners. So you may need to tumble your camera around and zoom in and whatever else to get to it. Okay, so looks like everyone got this part done. When we get to the top part and pulling that up, if we look at where this is at right now, like you might think, like let's just grab this and then pull that up, but that's definitely not going to be, that's not good, right? So we can do a couple things. One, we need an edge about the distance that we want that to happen, okay? Where we pull that back piece up, we need that distance. We can take this edge here, and this wouldn't hurt anything if we just pulled it forward and use that. That's perfectly acceptable to do. But there's other ways we can do it. I'm going to do it a different way. Okay, so I'm going to leave that edge where it is, and I'm going to switch to our second favorite tool, which is the knife tool. Okay, remember, knife, bevel, and extrude are our three favorite tools. So the knife tool, we are make sure we're in edges. We right click, and then we find knife tool in here, which they've relabeled it to loop path cut. Okay, but just so you can see, line cut, plane cut, and loop path cut are essentially, what version is this, 19? I think in 17 or 18 they were all under knife tool. Now they're all separate tools. Okay, so loop path cut we want to go to. One of the things you'll find with cinema, all your things, like when you're in edge mode, you right click, it only shows you stuff for edges that you could do. Okay, so it won't show you something that it can't do. Same thing with faces. When I'm in face mode and I right click, it's only showing me stuff that's face mode stuff. Okay, so just be aware that you have to be in edge mode, then right click, and you can get to that loop path cut. The menu, just right clicking. And then hotkeys here, so you can do KL or you can do ML.
So you have to hit KL at the same time?
You would hit K and then L without hitting anything else. So if you were to like hit, let me click off. If you were to hit K and then move your keyboard or move your mouse, then you have to start over. So if you just go KL, now you're in it. It's weird, right? The other thing with cinema, and they've done a good job of fixing this, but you have to be aware of it. Some of their, whatever tool you're in, the options show up down here. Okay, so we're in this loop path cut tool. Right now we want to make sure that restrict to selection is turned off. So make sure that when you're in that knife tool that is off. And I think everything else should be good. Yeah. You'll see sometimes that there's an option down here where like if that is checked on, I can't do anything at all. Like it won't let me add this at all. So now what I'm going to do is if you look, as I drag my mouse around the table, it's kind of showing me the direction that it's going to go. I want an edge right there. Okay, so I want another edge going basically like in the middle of this table right here. So all I have to do is just click when it's happy. All right, so you have to be aware of a few things, mainly just kind of be observant, right? So as I go here and this is allowing me to loop path cut this, you can see how that loop goes all the way around. If for some reason it just went straight, it was just like a straight line, or it stopped halfway, something else is going on there. Remember when I said that the double clicking, this thing here, works because everything is a quad? that tool works because everything is still a quad. Okay, so when we get away from quads, that's when it doesn't work. As a for instance, let's say I just manually kind of cut this like that. Okay, so now this face here is still a quad. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 edges that make this face. There's still 4 edges that make this face, but this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges that make that one. I'll select them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? So if I were to try to use that loop cut here, see how it's not going all the way around? And if I try to do it here, it doesn't go all the way around. Or if I try to do it here, it doesn't go all the way around. Okay? So that means something is going on. Now if I just went to this edge, and I just deleted that edge, you'll see how it just makes a hole here. So we have to be careful of how we delete stuff. Typically right-clicking and doing a melt will get rid of that. Oops, not melt, sorry. Dissolve, there it is. There we go, okay. So now if I were to go back to my loop split, everything's happy again. Okay, so just be aware there's ways that we would do that kind of thing. Also, just so you can see it, when I click on this edge, I get this up here. Okay, so that's a new thing too. I think 19 added it, where I could then slide the edge if I need to adjust it. So if I don't click it in the right spot and I don't want to re-drag it, I could, do this. You can also add edges in here. So if you're trying to divide something up, you can do that. So when we did our bookcase and we're like, oh, we need more edges, I could have just created a cube, clicked one edge, and then added all those edges individually. Okay, and then you can slide these around as needed. All right, switch to face mode. And now we're going to grab all the faces that belong to that top piece. Okay, this is going to be a tricky way, I guess, to extrude it. Watch how I grabbed all 6 pieces. I'm going to extrude it up until I get to the bottom of the first shelf. I'm going to extrude it up to get to the top of that bottom shelf. And I'm going to extrude it up again, and I'm going to extrude it up again. Oh, just switch to any other tool like the move tool or rotate. If you see where this is going, you can grab just these 2 pocket areas. That's where the openings should be. And then we're just going to extrude those inward. All right, so not terribly difficult, right? It's pretty simple once you understand where to put the divisions and where to extrude stuff and so on. Projects like this, you can, again, customize it for a lot of things. If I were to go here and just add, zoom in a little bit more, a little division here, a little division there, and then I went to my faces. There. Now we have like more drawers and stuff to put in there, right? So there's a lot that you can do with this kind of thing. It's just a matter of where are my divisions, isolating faces, and being able to extrude those things inward and so on. And obviously, you'll get to the point where things are more customizing. Right now, it may seem like it's very intimidating and frightening to try to fix anything that may be a problem. Like on mine, the thickness of the legs should not be the thickness of these 2 boards. That's like ridiculous. But if I just go in here and grab these and these, and I just scaled those outward, well, now they match better, right? That's not a huge deal. If I wanted my desk to be shorter, I can go into, I guess I'll grab points. I'm going to go into points, I need to marquee like a whole bunch of points. That's what this tool is. So this is live selection, which is typically what we've been doing, just kind of like clicking on different points and faces and edges. And then there's rectangle selection, which is more like you've seen in Photoshop or other software. So if I go into that, I can marquee, and then I can move entire groupings of points up and down and whatever. So if I needed like, yeah, you can make a chair, or this is a really crappy desk. Yeah. My parents hated me, so they gave me the bottom legs really short. Right? Again, stuff that's inside of Cinema that you have to be aware of. Is that one? Options, there we go. All of the tools have this thing called tolerance selection. They also have this thing called only select visible elements. Okay? So you'll, by the week 2, week 3, week 4, these will be a lot more like understandable of what you need to change when you need to change it. But just so you can see, if only visible is on, what do you think it's going to select? Right. So I just marqueed the entire desk. So the back points didn't get selected because they weren't visible. And so when I try to move it, it does that. Okay? So we don't want that on. Let's go to faces. I'm going to do tolerance selection. And I'm going to marquee. So you see how as I marqueed like halfway through this board, it grabbed it. If tolerant is off and I marquee it, it won't grab it. Okay? Because it's having this, basically like if you marquee any face, it will select it. If this is on, that's what it does. It's just like any piece of a face it'll grab. If it's off, you have to make sure you grab the entire face and then it will select it. Like I have to be over the entire thing. So just again, something to be aware of. And again, I can move it whatever way I need to. Okay? When you look at points, edges, and faces, points are simply like a dot. That's where anywhere we have a corner, that's a point. Anywhere we have 2 points connected, that's an edge. And anywhere we have 3 or more edges connected, that's where we have a face. Okay? So for this bookcase, if I'm trying to adjust something, I may grab a single point and want to just push that point over there. Okay, just to keep it looking nice. I may want to grab an edge if maybe I'm trying to, let's say, taper this. Okay, or maybe I'm trying to taper this. Yeah, let's go there, push that up. There you go. So I've kind of tapered that area. Or maybe I want to taper these legs. There you go. So there's a little taper on the legs now. I could have also selected the points. So by grabbing these 2 points, that's no different than me just grabbing that edge. Okay? By me grabbing this point here and that point there, there's no difference than me just grabbing this. Okay? It's the same exact thing. If I did this, that's no different than me grabbing this face and doing that. Okay? So sometimes you'll want these bigger selections of faces. Sometimes you'll want edges. Sometimes you'll want points. Typically, the only time I really grab the points is when I'm just trying to like make the flow of this a lot nicer. Okay, so bad geometry. No, I can't really see that one. Yeah. So on this one here, you can see these points. They're kind of like triangulated and pinched in and whatever. So for something like this, I'd be going point by point and smoothing this out so that there's a nice smooth roundness there. On this one here, that's like the result of having it nice and smooth. Nope. Same thing here. If I'm doing this head, I may work with single points and get the head to get the shape that I need. But if I'm trying to like take an eye and make the eye look good, I may grab faces, I may grab edges, whatever. Okay. you'll again know those once you're more comfortable with it. Cool. So there's our desk. Boom, boom. This is part of furniture, so I'm going to just give it a name. Desk. And I'm just going to drag my furniture layer onto that. I need to move it away and then lock the layer. There we go. All right, let's build one more thing together real quick, and then you can play around. So we should have some time for that. So now we're going to build a chair, and this is again going to be a pretty simple looking chair. It should match the desk shape some. Forget about the perspective on the drawing. That's good enough for us. All right, good enough. It's a horrible drawing, but whatever, we get the idea. Okay. So we're going to start off in a very similar fashion that we did the desk. We're going to start off working on just the seat part of the chair. So build a cube. And then we're going to flatten that base. Okay. Remember, we can always adjust the sizing later, so we don't need to be, overly concerned with getting the exact size. We're more worried about proportions at this point. And then for divisions, we should have divisions that look like this so that we can pull the legs down from the chair. Sometimes in cinema you'll lose the object area here. Just click off, click back on it, and then it'll show up. Obviously make sure we're in object mode, and we should be good. Okay, once you get to that point, just continue along. You kind of have an idea what the legs are going to be. Don't go past the legs yet, just stay the legs. Version of the chair that we're going to be building. You could build these if you want. I'm not going to show that. I'm going to show how we would do something like that, the back of that chair, okay? So we started off the same way as the desk. We had those divisions, we pushed them out, extruded the edges down. In order to pull the back up, you'll see that the thickness of this wood is actually pretty close to the thickness of that wood. There's actually probably like some thicker part right there when it hits, but it's close enough for us, right? If we wanted to make them any thicker, you don't have to do this part, but just so you can see, you can definitely just grab these and push them, and now that will be a thicker piece. And I could also grab these and push them in or scale them in, and that would make that thicker, okay? So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab this. That's where the back of the chair is going to go. So where these two back supports are, and we're just going to extrude them as high as the back of the chair is going to go. Okay, so that's as high up as the back of the chair is going to go. That's where we want to put those. And then what you'll see too, after you've modeled your stuff, the size of your bookcase, your desk, your chair, all these things, you know, making sure they're kind of uniform so that one's not huge and then the desk is this big and then the chair is like super tiny. You know, you want to have somewhat consistency between them. Don't do less. In order to do that, we need those divisions. So one way that we can do that, anytime you extrude something, you have options over here. Anytime you use any tool, you have options. So one of those options is subdivisions. So I could just click in the amount of subdivisions I would have for that. Okay? Now you'll see I get some kind of weird behavior as I do that. And you might too, right? Because if I extruded this, oops, let me take those off first. Undo, there we go. If I extrude this up, and then I move it up, and then I start to add divisions, it kind of jumps back to where it was, okay? So most of the time I won't use this. Most of the time I'll resort to something else, okay? And typically what I'll do is I'll use the edge loop split or something like that. That's usually what I want to use for that. So for this thing, and I think I want to have like the bottom of the chair there or something. Yeah, so this is the chair part right here. All right. So for this, I have 1, 2, 3 slats basically. I'm going to ignore that top one for now. So we just have 2 slats. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that knife loop tool. So I make sure I'm in edges. I hit KL, right, or right click and find that loop path cut. I'm going to click once and then use this. Click once and then use that. That way they're evenly distributed, so I don't have to worry about where exactly they're going to be positioned. Okay? Now in order for me to get the area for those slats, I'm envisioning that they're going to go right here. Like I want them to cross right there and cross right here. There's not enough information yet to do that. I basically need one face here, one face there, and Cinema will actually, it's called bridge, will bridge those 2 faces together. Okay? So I'm going to double click this, shift double click that, shift double click that, shift double click that. And I'm going to use our other tool. What's our third favorite tool? Bevel. Okay? So Bevel's hotkey is MS. I don't know where they came up with the numbers or names or any of these hotkeys. So I'm going to go to Bevel, and what Bevel is going to allow me to do is take one edge and split it into 2 edges. Okay? So I've grabbed those loops. I'm in Bevel. I'm just going to click and drag. And however far I click and drag, that's how big those boards are going to be. Okay, so right now this will then connect to that. This will then connect to that. And that would be the back support piece of wood that would go there. Okay? So I'm going to switch to this real quick. I'll show this and then I can come around. So I'm going to grab both of these faces here because those are the ones I want to connect. I'm going to go to my menu. I'm going to go to bridge. I don't use bridge too often, but it's an indispensable tool for stuff like this. The way this one works is I simply drag this face to the other side and say this is what I want to connect. And it connects it. And I'll do the same thing here. I have to switch out of the tool, so I go to the Move tool, I go to Bridge, I drag across, and there it is. And then I can just kind of shrink these down. Okay, now if I wanted these, if I wanted more of these, when I did that first split, I would just add more rungs, right? And then when I did my bevel, I would just have more stuff to select, more loops that I have, and then this process would just take a couple extra steps. Now the final step I'll do on this one is I'm going to go back to my loop split tool and just add a couple here and a couple there. And the reason for this is because I want to be able to, this would be a terribly painful chair, so just want to push it back a little bit. And that gives just a little bit of contour there. And then I'll throw one here, close enough, throw one there, close enough. And give that a little bit of seating area. Okay, so there's my chair. Now I'm going to take this again, I'll throw it on my layer after I give it a name, chair. Make it part of the furniture. I'll unlock my furniture and then I can start moving stuff, arranging it. If my chair is too small, I'll scale it up and then move it into position. That's still way too big. Oops. It's better to have it stick in the floor just a little bit than to have it floating. All right, so that looks pretty proportioned there. The bookcase is huge, but that's fine. It's a huge trophy showcase. Here's my monitor. Another one next to it. Whoops. These are like 12-inch screens apparently. That's like super tiny. There we go. Okay. So then the next stage is just kind of going through and roughing things out. Once you're at this point, it's just a matter of then going through and kind of adding stuff to the room. So you go online, you have your sketches from your sketchbook that you have been drawing in. So you may have different things that you want to put in there, a pencil case, a Rolodex, a mouse, one of these like crazy lamps. Okay, it's not going to be the best looking lamp and I'm fine with that. I'm not concerned too much with modeling right now. I'm more concerned about you being able to go through the process of conceptualizing what the thing is and just, even if it's basic shapes, kind of visualizing it and putting it out there. Using the extrudes, using the splits. Okay. So take the rest of today to finish up the chair if you didn't, and then to add other stuff to the room.